was turned into a cabinet position. So one of the themes of our work is citizen voices matter. We work for people that are having environmental problems. And if you haven't been out to western Wisconsin, it's pretty crazy. And some counties worse than others, but there's this exploding landscape scale destruction that's going on. And I'll try to give you a little idea about how under-regulated it actually is. So Wisconsin really is the epicenter for supplying frac sand in North America. So over 2/3 of the frac sand that's used for hydraulic fracturing for oil and gas comes from Wisconsin. And that's why we've had such just a really rapid expansion of this activity here in Wisconsin. So this just gives a little idea of how quickly the volume has gone up, and these are old charts, but at the same time that this industry has grown exponentially, so have campaign contributions. And I'm not sure how good the resolution is on a small screen, but the blue bar graph is campaign contributions from this industry, and they've gone up 1,200% in the last couple of years. This map just gives you a little bit of an idea where this is occurring in the state. The Center for Investigative Journalism has really been the best source of keeping up with how many mines there are, and on their website they have some great information and some really good graphics, and this is one of theirs. So you can see it's mostly in the driftless area is where this is going on. One important thing to know is that it's not just the mining itself that is problematic both for the environment and for public health, but every part of the activities, every part of the process. So from mining and then the processing of the sand, they use lots and lots of water. Shipping is a problem. And then, of course, for people living in the area, blasting and noise and lights on 24/7, the particulate matter from as many as 900 trucks a day going by your house. So pretty extensive activities that have popped up, literally in a couple of years. So, excuse me, one of the things to know is the state regulations that govern this industry are laws that were designed for small sand and gravel pits. And it's absolutely not adequate. We're coming into spring, and I know we'll see a lot of problems once rains come and there's some flooding out west that's predicted. There's a general stormwater permit that controls this industry that is basically a narrative standard. So they basically say, we'll spray water on this. It's not a complicated technical standard where there, are meaningful controls. And last year in Trempealeau County, a man's house was washed away from a breach by having no proper stormwater controls. But if you just get a look at these pictures, the one in the upper right corner, those are all train cars waiting to be loaded from a processing facility. So as I mentioned before, there's a lot of water used. They have to separate the sand for the perfectly round sand that's used in fracking, and I've got a picture of that in a minute here. And throughout this presentation, I've tried to embed some links in the slides so that you can go for more information later, because these are going to be on Grassroots North Shore website. And but I'm going to talk mostly about air as we go along, but I do want to make the point that this really is landscape scale destruction, and everything from groundwater to surface water, air, habitat destruction. This is sometimes parts of western Wisconsin are called the Montana of Wisconsin for the really nice cold water streams in deep valleys. And not only are there discharges to those streams, but as climate changes and the temperature warms up, one of the really important features in the coulee region are the trees that shade water. So they just skin all the trees off and blow stuff up and get the sand. This is a processing facility in Blair, and one of the big issues with this industry is the high use of water. So you have high capacity wells that pump, thousands of gallons of water per minute. There's quite a range of these operations. EOG, Enron Oil and Gas, they're probably the largest, and then there are smaller operations. The large ones, pretty large scale, but they also tend to have a little better control. Not adequate, and they're not really monitored or watched by DNR, but quite a range of the quality of these facilities. So the link on the bottom here is to a report. The DNR board, the citizen board that used to hire and fire the DNR secretary and no longer has that power, they asked the staff of DNR to do a study early on when this industry was really picking up. And take a look at this, follow through on, look at this link. At the end of the study, the recommendation was that if this industry kept growing rapidly, that DNR should do cumulative impact analyses, which would be looking at all of these effects of, pumping lots of groundwater, polluting groundwater, air pollution, problems with local roads and local facilities. There's safety concerns when railroad tracks are clogged up over country roads, so emergency vehicles can't get across roads in certain areas. I've heard of people waiting up to 2 hours to be able to get across a train track. So all of those kinds of impacts, socioeconomic and environmental impacts, really should be studied by the DNR. And the report that was completed in 2012 said, if this industry keeps growing, we'll do that. Well, there were less than 10 facilities and mines back then, and now we've certainly had a lot more growth than that. So, but we're not getting anywhere fast on DNR doing any kind of studies. I just put this in to remind us why it's important that we don't accept cabinet position for our DNR secretary. Back in the 20s, Aldo Leopold went to the legislature and made it really clear that we have to manage our natural heritage with science, not with politics. And the reason I bring this up is it's made a big difference. So under the Walker administration, the DNR's actual enforcement of the law is down greatly in many categories, and that goes for the implementation of the law, issuing permits that are technically sound, monitoring facilities that have a chance to harm public health and the environment. And when I was in the DNR under the Doyle administration, and there was quite a bit of micromanaging there as well, because the secretary then also was a cabinet position. And it just really, really matters. I doubled a slide here for you. So you probably all have heard there have been 2 bills introduced this last session in the state legislature, both by Tom Tiffany, a senator that doesn't live anywhere near frac sand mining, And the bills were to take local control away. I think it's pretty clear, at least it is to me, from the rapid expansion of this industry, they're not having any trouble getting started. And they basically have almost no regulation at all, except locally. And one of the last bill that thankfully didn't go anywhere, both of those bills from Senator Tiffany were not able to pass the legislature because the legislators out in western Wisconsin knew they couldn't get away right before an election cycle here. They could not vote for these bills, and citizens really did a great job of being heard. And the Towns Association joined in on this last bill at the last minute, and that made a big difference as well. This is Donna Brogan. She's a client in a lawsuit we have going on that the hearings will start in early April. So local government and citizens really have played an important role. There are many, many battles at the local level. So there's great activists around the state. It's been a little hard for people to come together because local control, local police powers and ordinances are really one of the only safeguards citizens have at this point. And so these fights are at the local level, so there are lots and lots of human power, a lot of work going in at the local level. Again, the fights are local, so there's many points of activity, and it does make it a little hard for a greater movement to come together. So this was a State Journal cartoon around the time of the first Tiffany bill. I guess this says it all, that the bills were introduced because these big mining companies apparently need more help from the government, and I think it says it all there. So this was just a headline recently from the second bill that Tiffany introduced, and again, citizens did a great job. People from all over the state called their legislators and showed up at hearings where they had very little notice, which is kind of par for the course for this legislature. And just some of the good news from all of this local activity, Trempealeau County, which is where the highest concentration of sand mining is in Wisconsin, they had some folks on the county board that were making money and had some conflicts of interest, and the county board came very close to passing a moratorium, and then a county board member did go to the DA and request an investigation, and two members of the board were no longer allowed to vote on issues. They finally had to recuse themselves. So Trempealeau County was able to pass a moratorium. The other good news, very recent in Trempealeau County, is one of these guys who's been a real bully on the county board. He didn't even make it through the primary. So all over the state, people are running for local office, and when they're tired of not being represented or having their family's health sold out by people that are swayed by industry. One of the real problems, and I'm going to get into some air stuff here in just a minute, but one of the real problems with having the DNR really controlled by politics and special interests, even though there are good men and women in the DNR, and boy, I hope they can hang on. The DNR, as I showed you before, really isn't enforcing the law. So the costs and the burdens of protecting public health and the environment really are on the backs of citizens. And Midwest Environmental Advocates, we're about the only game in town if citizens can't afford to hire lawyers and experts. And the really expensive part of this work and this kind of litigation are buying science. And it's science that the DNR used to provide, and should be providing. So, tens and tens of thousands of dollars to go to court with good science. Another important issue to remember is that we do have laws that govern some of this. Some of the laws are inadequate, but we do have laws under the Federal Clean Water Act and Federal Clean Air Act that are administered by Wisconsin DNR. But it's really important to remember that laws are not self-actualizing. It takes government, it takes citizens. So the fact that so many citizens around the state are stepping up and being watchdogs and documenting violations of the law and just, really being good watchdogs in their communities is critically important because no one else is really doing it. So, as I mentioned, we have two legal actions regarding air pollution. In this industry, you can see that really fine dust. Well, that's a waste product and that's the most dangerous element. And I'll talk a little more as we go along. So here's these are all counties, and you can see at the bottom of the chart, Trempealeau is really the heaviest hit of all counties with the highest concentration. And that's where we decided to use our limited resources, is helping people with air pollution. And this is from last summer, so it's a little worse today, but this is a picture of Trempealeau County, before the boom and after this boom. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful place. People who love the area, they live there because it's beautiful and rural, or used to be. There are quite a few health problems with frac sand mining, potential health problems from air pollution. This is Crispin Pierce. He's a public health professor at UW-Eau Claire, and he and his students have been doing air monitoring around facilities, and what they're finding are big red flags that legal standards for air quality are being exceeded, and DNR really has not joined as a partner with Crispin Pierce, and they criticize his work and sometimes, and he's doing a lot with not lots of resources, but really, again, he and his students, just regular people are the ones that are doing the job of government right now. So up in the right-hand corner, you see those grains of sand that are perfectly round. That's what they want for hydrofracking. And it has to be very clean and very uniform and to be accepted when it gets sent out to the oil and gas fields. So they send high volumes of water and chemicals under high pressure down to fracture the bedrock. And these particles need to be very round so that they don't have a lot of friction going down, so they go in deeply, but then they're strong enough that they can hold the cracks open for the oil and the gas to come out. So down in the left-hand corner, that's a picture of this tiny, they call it respirable crystalline dust. And this is a waste product. It's much tinier than these big grains of sand, and they're have sharp, rough edges. And the problem with that is they go very deep into the lungs and don't come out. So it acts like asbestos. There are many peer-reviewed studies showing, a lot of peer-reviewed studies, and I'm not expecting us to read all of this, but it's to be a resource on the web after we're done. But there are lots and lots of peer-reviewed studies showing the danger of this tiny respirable crystalline dust. These are government warnings. This kind of dust is controlled in the workplace. So there are a group of citizens out in western Wisconsin who petitioned the DNR early on to extend the legal protections for workplaces to actual people and their homes that are living near these facilities and this activity, and they were just summarily turned down. So it's pretty crazy that some folks living out there, they have so much dust in their home that they wouldn't pass the public health standards for workers, but yet there's no legal standard that applies to them other than the air permits that are issued to these facilities, and that's what we're challenging. Have two legal challenges to air permits. Again, just another statement that it's not something that we have to guess about. There's a lot of scientific information about the health risks of exposure to this respirable crystalline dust. The air permits that we're challenging, again, it's federal law that's administered by the state, so our state legislature can't roll back the standards. They're standards we have to meet. And we hired an air engineer to start reviewing these permits and found that they don't come close to meeting the technical standards in the law as it exists. So just for instance, one of the parts of the formula of deciding how much pollution, how much emissions of dust there is from these facilities is the ambient air quality, the background air. And in all of these permits, even in Trempealeau County, where there's the highest concentration of frac sand probably in the world, but certainly in Wisconsin, they use clean air as the background. And people living anywhere near this stuff can tell you the air is not clean to begin with, but many, many technical problems. So we'll be April 7th through the 11th is when the contested case hearing, a legal proceeding against that permit will be going on. These are also our clients, the Winey family. Nancy and Paul are both healthcare professionals, and they've got sand mines all around them. And as you see, they have a lovely young family, and so they're very concerned. And being healthcare professionals, they know the dangers to their families. So they're one of those, really courageous families that are standing up to a powerful industry and are, taking action. Just some examples. There's been a lot of great activism. The Wisconsin Grassroots Network has done a lot of working with people on messaging and mining, and there's many, many champions. There's a woman named Pat Popple in Chippewa County who has been maybe the super watchdog right from the beginning and is a person who tries to connect people through emails and just, sharing information and getting words out on hearings and things like that. So we're at a point where we can, it would be great to have, I'm sorry, I see that there are some questions and I wasn't actually watching there, but I'll get to that. So this is Robert Mann. The Ho-Chunk Nation has become very active on frac sand. They have many of their community members living in counties where these activities are happening, including, elder housing that's surrounded by these dust-producing facilities. So they're pretty concerned. And there's a lot of concern, too, that because there's just, hundreds and hundreds of acres just ripped apart, that there are cultural sites that Ho-Chunk is very concerned about, that there aren't good reviews of what's the ground that's being torn up before it's torn up, and they're worried about losing cultural properties as well. So I'm going to leave this lovely picture of Robert up while we get to questions. And there's a question here that says, why can't people call in the CDC for studies? there, and OSHA. Well, because we can't call OSHA in because it only applies to workplaces. We have been engaging the US EPA that has oversight of the DNR for air permits, and but one thing we have to do is litigate, because we've tried to work with DNR and with our air engineers, and we're just simply told by one staff member that they're not going to be allowed to issue a decent permit, that we're going to have to sue them. So real waste of time and money on some regards, that we should be moving forward and working together. But if it takes litigation to protect people's health, then that's what we're willing to do. And there's a question here about the standards for wind turbines compared with sand. And, you know, there are setbacks and things like that for the wind turbines, but there really aren't there aren't many regulations at all for sand. There are some wastewater discharge permits for the facilities that use a lot of water. There are air permits, as I've mentioned, for these facilities where they're cleaning sand, which includes drying sand, and moving sand around creates an awful lot of dust. There's a lot of crazy stuff on the roadways that people see, the sludge from the cleaning facilities. So I would say we've probably got more restrictions on wind turbines than we do on sand mines, although we do have some laws that, if properly implemented, could protect the public, and then we also just have totally insufficient technical standards. Is MPCA, is that Minnesota Pollution Control Agency? I think that's, yeah. So yeah, actually Minnesota just passed an air standard so that respirable crystalline dust is actually a hazardous air pollutant that can be regulated. And that's what the citizens who wrote the petition to DNR had asked for. California, Texas, Minnesota, and Vermont, I believe, are the only states that have actual standards. So it gets pretty complicated that, you know, you can't enforce a law that doesn't exist, and that's where citizens are in this kind of catch-22, as well as DNR really is not doing monitoring or any kind of cumulative impact analysis on air. And, you know, it's just a real problem, because they'll say, well, we don't have enough information to regulate this, but then they're not out actively gathering information. And then there's another question here that says, I must be naive, but silicosis and other diseases are known to be caused by silica sand. Absolutely. And even those large particles of sand, there's been a lot of concern in the actual oil and gas fracking fields for workers, and that stuff is not nearly as dangerous as the tiny particles that are the waste products that are all over the landscape out in western Wisconsin. And what's really sad is that, like asbestos, you know, silicosis can take 10 to 20 years to develop. So, you know, are these companies going to be anywhere around? So the reason why we decided that it was worth the expense and the time of litigating on these air issues is that we're very worried for people. And folks out in western Wisconsin, when we went out as this industry was growing so quickly and talked to people about what their concerns were, I mean, many people just break down crying. They can't believe that they're being put at risk and that their own government won't help them. So clearly, sometimes the power of the law is what you have when we, you know, have such when we're in a time like we are now, where special interests in politics, you know, really run the show. So there's a question here about with sand will run out. There's a question about when will the sand run out. Unfortunately, we're a long way away from that. And we're just a long way away from that, and you've all got a lot of fighting and a lot of organizing to do just to slow this industry down and hold it accountable now. So yeah, it's really helpful. There's a question about the Minnesota Public Health Department. It's actually been really helpful that Minnesota has been so proactive, and that we're able at least to get some good information and hopefully extrapolate some of that information to Wisconsin, and try to elevate some of the citizens' voices who are really concerned. And yeah, I mean, the wins that have happened and the successes that have happened really are individual people coming together, and in Western Wisconsin, lots of people running for local office. Even the best of small jurisdictions, these are pretty complicated issues for them to deal with. And then when you've got people waving money and threatening to sue you, the industry, if you don't go their way, there's been a lot of problems in that regard. So a lot of citizens are standing up and running for office themselves. So I see that Stacy Harbaugh, if you look in the message part, Stacy is a communications coordinator at Midwest Environmental Advocates, and so she's put up some extra information there. Yeah, the larger particles definitely are dangerous. That Eugene brings up a good point here. So, I mean, all of this dust is dangerous, but these tiny, tiny particles that are a waste product, they're not only dangerous to people's lungs, but it's pretty scary because no one really cares too much what happens to this stuff because it's a waste product. So it gets moved around, and they're actually using it to reclaim some of the sites. So they'll fill areas back in with this concentrated tiny, tiny particles. And remember, part of the process is shaking all of the minerals apart to get to that perfectly round sand that the industry wants. So, in nature, these things are all bound together with clay, and so it takes using chemicals and water and friction and to break these apart to get at what they want. And so that's one of the things that concerns me the most. Yeah, and the big particles are dangerous too, but the larger the particle, they don't go as deep into your lungs. So you're right that it does tend to be the PM4. If monitoring was done for PM4, that would capture a lot of the dust. Although they should be monitoring for PM2.5, a smaller particle. But DNR is refusing to do that. They monitor for PM10, and because none of these facilities would be meeting legal standards pretty much if they were measuring for PM2.5. And we see here that the studies are based on 4. So I really appreciate that information. So is anyone else have any questions? And does everybody see that in the bottom right left-hand corner you can type in questions? Yeah, we'll
yeah. I think it's probably time to wrap it up. Kim, thank you so very much. And please remember, Kim's presentation will be available on our website in about a week. And we encourage you to send your friends to see it.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Thank you, and thanks for the Grassroots North Shore for doing this project and being able to bring us all together in a pretty easy way. So thanks a lot for thinking up this great idea. Thanks for coming.
Bye all.